25th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. Please join me in saluting the flag.
They're right there.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the record show all selectmen are present. Consent agenda warrant number 21 dated 2/11/19. Payroll number 7, 2/14/19. Number 8, 2/21/19.
Move to accept.
Sorry.
We have a motion and a second to accept the warrants and payroll registers as read. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
Under the consent agenda, there was a late item added, and that was a renewal of the liquor license for Brown Family Enterprises, which is Lakewood Golf Course.
For a motion?
Oh, so moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for a liquor license for the Brown Family Enterprises doing business at Lakewood Golf Course. We have a motion and a second. All those, any questions? All those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Letter D, acceptance of the meeting minutes of February 11th, 2019.
Move to accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the meeting minutes of February 11th, 2019. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Old business, Mr. Moody?
None for me, Mr. Chairman.
That's me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Savage? Mr. Newshaw? Okay, items of communication, Mr. Town Manager?
Just a couple things to pass along to you. Well, the State Board of Property Tax Review met on Friday, the 15th of February. They did not discuss the Madison paper abatement, and they did not set a date to discuss the Madison paper abatement. So according to our town attorney, that board may not meet again until late March or early April. And as we'll discuss in further detail as we talk about the budget, the impact of that decision certainly impacts our budget planning as we go forward. The town, as you recall, took a $400,000 advance on our line of credit at the end of 2018. Kathy's been in touch with Bangor Savings just to see where it stands. It's to date about $2,600 of interest has accrued on that $400,000. It sits in our checking account right now. Sometimes when you ask the finance officer about our checking account balance, she'll let you know if the balance she gives you includes that $400,000. What was on the inside of the warrant does not include that $400,000.
So when they meet in March, we're not sure if that's even gonna come up.
They have not scheduled the deliberation of the Madison paper abatement. So we're hoping that late March, early April will be the time for that. Down in Augusta at the state legislature, the Energy Committee will be hearing testimony on the bill to amend Madison Electric Works charter. That hearing is tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Superintendent Calvin Ames attends to be there. Phil Curtis and Brad Farron are co-sponsors of the bill. Both the town office in Anson and Madison have sent letters of support for the bill, and we've also mentioned the fact that it was approved by a town meeting for Madison Electric to go forward with this. As of today, I believe, Madison Electric has hired a new superintendent, a gentleman by the name of Jeff Melcher, lives in Oakland, had a career at Chimbro, and he plans on starting soon. So I believe he's meeting with the MEW board tonight. In your packets, I put some information that I shared via email regarding Fabian Oil, and a note from Bob's Cash Fuel regarding our oil bids, just to let the board know that we've been kind of working without a fixed price contract for a couple of years, and Rob Shibley has noted that has worked in our favor. So it was kind of the consensus of the board to report back and see where we stood on that. It's my recommendation that we kind of continue as we have in the past on oil bids. And finally, today we got, sorry.
Should we have a motion on that for Bob's?
Not necessarily, because we're not awarding anything to anyone. I don't think it needs to be a motion.
Okay.
We received a letter today that Beeline Cable has announced a rate increase, a total of $8.15 for basic service and broadcast services. That's channels 2 through 17. The new rate for that service will be $109.54 per month. Unless there's any questions, that's all I have for items of communication.
Mr. Elias.
How was their franchise fee compared to a few years ago?
Because they continue to do small rate increases, the amount that the town receives has not gone down drastically. Although the number of cable subscribers in Skowhegan, Madison, and Anson has gone down by about 30% in the last 5 years. We are on pace this year to take in about $16,000 or $17,000 in franchise fees. The town of Madison's portion for the Channel 11 budget is almost $19,000. So we are running short. In years past, it was never an issue. You always took in more in franchise fees than what you paid Channel 11. But now, all 3 towns are running short, and that's a decision. You'll see it not tonight, but later on in the budget, an increased line item in the budget to make up that gap.
Okay. I thought I saw that in there.
Okay, new business, number 1, budget review with department heads.
So, in your packets and over there on the table, I jotted together some general budget concerns, or budget considerations I wanted to go over briefly before we take a look at the budget per se. Patrick, can you get that light back there? You gotta kind of play Russian roulette to figure out which light it is. There you go. Pretty good, yeah. So, some of the impacts on the budget this year have to do with positions that are going from part-time to full-time. There's been an increase in the amount we budget for personnel, both in the administration and in the highway department. And that's kind of moving some positions around. We added a person in highway this year. We have taken a person from part-time to full-time in administration, working up to 32 hours a week. In this budget, that plan is to take that administration person up to 40 hours per week. So not a significant change, but a change nonetheless. The other impact is minimum wage requirements. For the first couple of years, when minimum wage went to $9 and $10, we were able to absorb that in our existing budget lines. We've kind of got to the point now where we have to bump those budget lines, where we're paying minimum wage in our recreation department, we're paying minimum wage at the library, and we're paying close to minimum wage for our volunteer firefighters when they do get paid for their hourly work. We've had to bump that, all of those areas as a result of that. You're probably aware, but maybe the budget committee members that are here aren't, that there's a stormwater fee that will be assessed by the Anson-Madison Sanitary District. That'll make about a $60,000 difference in the budget this year. So if you take a look at all our departments, and what we're looking at tonight is primarily our departments, you'll see probably about an overall increase of about 2%, which is in line with the increases to personnel. When you take a look at the overall budget right now, it's an overall increase of about 4.5% because of that $60,000 stormwater fee and a couple of other small things. The other thing I touched on earlier in my items of communication, the road commissioner and the fire chief have put together a capital spending plan, which includes about $350,000 in paving and $100,000 set aside for some equipment purchases. In my conversations with both of them, when we talk about capital, the bottom line is if we have to pay up to $400,000 or maybe even $800,000 to Madison Paper to settle this abatement, that will put a very tight squeeze on what we will be able to raise in taxation. My hope is, best case scenario, is we would be able to put back that $400,000 that we borrowed and just pay the interest and give that back to the bank. We have approximately $400,000 in our undesignated fund balance that we could use to fund capital projects or to give back to the taxpayer after the budget is approved. That's assuming we don't have to pay anything to Madison Paper. So again, it really puts a crimp on our ability to be ready for our budget meeting for the advisory board, which will be on April the 3rd, on a Wednesday, I believe. And hopefully by then we'll know where we stand with the abatement.
Rudy?
Any of these capital items, anything that has to be purchased this coming year, or can it be broken down in a couple of years?
And I think that's gonna be up to the boards and the budget advisory committee to discuss those options when we look at them. When we go to look at the public works and highway, I'll let Jeff tell you kind of what he's thinking in regards to some of these purchases. And I've got an idea what Don's thinking about too in fire. All right. If it's okay with everyone, I'd like to just take a look at the library budget. That should be the first one in your handouts, and it's the one up here on the board that I wish I could make those numbers bigger, but at this point, that's what they are. Overall, the library budget is a change of less than 2%, and that biggest change occurs in the personnel line. And that's primarily because our substitute librarian and our part-time librarians' pay is very close to minimum wage. The substitute is minimum wage?
Yes,
Okay, so the substitute is minimum wage, and then there's a dollar difference, I believe,
right.
between the substitute and those part-timers. And they make up a total of 30 hours a week?
For the both of them, yes,
Yeah.
they each work 15.
Right. So, like I mentioned before, the bump of minimum wage, we've been able to absorb it in past budgets, but we had to increase it in this budget. So that's really the only change in the library budget. Everything else is pretty much the same, except with a maybe $100 more in office supplies.
Right.
So I don't know if the board or anybody on the committee had any questions regarding the library.
Safety?
So we'll be going to the fire department next.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
What is the minimum now, wage?
The minimum wage as of right now is $11 an hour.
Okay, is that pushing, do we have people that work for us full-time that get, let's say 12, and now people coming in are gonna get 11? Is that, do we have anything like that happening?
None of our full-timers, I believe the most recent hires that we've made in the highway department that came to us with no experience were started at 15 or 15.5. So that was,
So we're gonna have no gripes there, where I've been working here 5 years and I'm only getting 12?
well, it does impact some of the folks that have been here 15, 16, 17 years as that gap gets smaller. But we
It's
have nobody,
impacting me.
what's that?
Just so you know, George, it is impacting me. I mean, when we first started doing this 3 years ago, my wage as head librarian was about $9 away from minimum wage, and now my wage is getting to be about $6 away from minimum wage. I understand I'm not close to minimum wage, I make $18.21, I'll get a 2% raise, but I've worked for the town, part-time and then full-time for 19 years.
Yeah,
But,
but when they keep giving $1 a year, that's gonna affect,
well, the increase is substantially more for the people who are close to minimum wage, but this will, at 12, there's no more increase. The two women that have worked part-time have gotten that extra dollar every year to keep them away from the sub pay, because the sub person has only worked 2-3 years, and they've worked 7, almost 8 years. But then, when it goes to 12, they'll be at 12, and when minimum goes to 12, they're only getting the 2% raise. We can't keep jumping it because mine isn't going, and it's
yeah, I know.
It's getting to the point where it's, it's skilled work, but they've had, $3 worth of pay increases because of the minimum
Right.
in 3 years. So it does impact, but it's not, I'm certainly not close enough to minimum wage to say, hey, wait a minute.
But I'm not talking about just library, I'm talking about the whole town.
Right.
But we'll take a look at that when we look at the fire budget, because that does impact that. And I will say about the minimum wage law, that as it was passed, right now it stops at $12 an hour, but there is a cost of living increase that kicks into that minimum wage every year. So every year, that Maine law, which makes Maine very different from the rest of the country, that Maine law, that minimum wage can increase in incremental amounts. There are bills in the state legislature right now to bump it to 15. So
For when?
my guess is it would continue on this dollar path that it has been over the next couple of years. So that's just something that everybody that's in the workplace has to keep in mind these days when we take a look at budgets and so forth. So if you go to page 2, that's the fire department budget. And again, when you take a look at personnel, up here, that's the biggest jump from $55,000 in the current budget up to $61,000. And that is primarily based on an estimate, thank you, Julie,
Thank you.
an estimate of how many hours these volunteers may put in. Because depending on how many calls they respond to, how many work days they have, how many trainings they go to, it varies. As you can see, last year, we had budgeted 54,000, but we only spent 45. Our total number of calls was down a little bit last year compared to the year before. So as we move ahead in the budget, not only are we continuing to budget a certain amount of hours, this year, those volunteer fire department, or last year, those volunteer firefighters were paid $11.20 an hour.
That's it?
That's their hourly rate. And see, they've been another one that's been fighting against this minimum wage increase. So in this current year's budget, the $61,000 figure includes a pay of $13.25 an hour. Again, trying to keep those firefighters ahead of that minimum wage curve. So that is the big bump in that particular category.
No wonder that the state is hard up for volunteer firefighters.
Exactly.
It's all over the state.
Right.
I mean, for what they're doing, for what they're getting paid,
So,
it's pretty rough, I would say. That was a firefighter.
right. Obviously, it's not their full-time job. And
I know, but it sure as hell seems to be if it was my house burning.
well, exactly. So you put those firefighters in a position of, if I get a call during the day, and I'm at my job where I get paid $15, $20 an hour, do I leave my job and risk my health for just a little bit more minimum wage? And every municipality is struggling with this with
Oh,
firefighters.
yeah, well, it's all in the news every day. Okay.
I will make note of a savings. In some cases, it's bigger than others, but workman's comp across the board, our total workman's comp payments came down this year because we had an old claim finally fall off as far as the time goes. So you'll see some savings in workman's comp across the board. Just about everything else is similar to last year. Don did raise some funds for vehicle maintenance and vehicle repairs. That was a little higher than the last year. But overall, the fire department budget, if you come down to the bottom line, is about an 8% increase. And the main reason for that 8% increase is the increase in the wages. $103,000 is our current budget, $111,730 is the proposed budget. Any questions on the fire department?
Still alive.
Do they charge, do we pay them for lift assist? Do they keep track of that when the ambulance calls and need, you don't know?
I don't know that. I don't know how many of our people respond, because no one's gonna leave their work for a lift assist.
No, but if I'm home,
True. Right. But, that's a good question for Don. I don't know.
I think the ambulance has the availability of 2 trucks, right?
but does the ambulance service pay that?
No, I'm saying the ambulance service has the ability to have 2 trucks available. Right?
Two ambulances?
Right.
Right.
So I mean, wouldn't that make sense if those guys are doing the lift assist?
Not if they're out. one truck's in Bangor, and then,
Right, I don't know. I don't know.
I'll mention it here because Don and I talked about it as far as capital equipment goes. Don has two concerns. One is the fire truck that is a pumper tanker that turns 30 years old this year. The town has applied for a assistance to firefighters grant for $330,000. There's about a 1% chance that you, because essentially 1% of people that apply for truck grants get approved. So that's something that I told Don that we will continue to try to apply for grants for. It's certainly not something that we could raise all at once, and even if we did raise a little bit of money at a time, it would take quite a while to get up to that level. The other thing that Don's concerned about is the SCBA tanks and the packs that they wear on their backs when they go into a fire. If you remember, we got 40 new packs just 5 years ago. I think it's 40 total bottles, maybe 20 packs. And the whole harness and the canisters and all that runs about $7,000 a piece. So we got a $180,000 grant to replace all of our old ones all at once. So after doing that, the question is, okay, do we wait until they're all out of service in 10 years and just get another grant to try to replace them? Or do we start putting money away now to replace them? The problem is, you'd have to budget in such a way that you put money away, but you don't need it to spend it for another 10 years. And so that's one of the things that Don and I have been going back and forth. So, anything else on fire? If not, Public Works, Highway Department is the next one on page 4. Overall, you'll see again the increases here have to do with personnel. Now, for those of you who are following the year-to-date expenses, don't get too excited because these personnel expenses don't include the month of February. The expenses only go through the end of January, and we've got a boatload of overtime to pay out for the storms we've had in February. Pretty much at this point, we're getting close to the 60-65% mark on overtime. We've pretty much capped out what we budgeted for salt and calcium, and we're getting pretty close to what we budgeted for diesel fuel. It's just every town that, I don't know if you saw the article in the paper the other day, Waterville, Skowhegan, everybody's in the same boat because of the number of people. Fortunately for us, we were able to hire that 7th employee this year, so we had a crew of 7 people working this year, and so we continue to add that into the budget for the coming year so that we will budget for 4 full-time workers and 3 seasonal workers. So that is what is represented in that total number of 307,000. Just about every budget line in the highway department is flat year over year. And so at the bottom, you'll see that the highway department budget, even with increases to personnel, is coming in at an overall increase of about 1%. Any questions for the road commissioner, or any questions in regards to the highway budget?
Jeff, how long before you think you'll be coming to us wanting some more money? When you run out of salt, wages for overtime, the way the winter's going?
Next week.
At least you're honest about that.
No, projected weather, and the way to project the weather, but, next week looks fairly reasonable, and the days are getting longer and are getting warmer slowly by slowly, so, to answer that question, I really have no idea. I know I just bought some more salt today, that puts us over by, $1,000, I believe, or $1,500.
Is the price holding?
Yes, that's a price that we negotiated back last June in the KV call, and that stays the same regardless.
Okay, yep, okay.
So this is an area though that we can go to town meeting with.
add, if we need to add to the budget.
So technically, while you're right there on that page, this is the budget for, so just under 600,000, 598,000. That's your public works budget that was approved by town meeting. The state allows an emergency of 15% for public works. So when you run into a winter like this, if you end up overspending this budget by 15%, which is $90,000, you can do that without having to go back to the voters at town meeting. If you go beyond that extra 90,000, and this number does not include our salt. Our salt is paid for out of our TIF account, because when we updated our TIF amendments, we included the possibility of building a new salt shed, and because roads are a priority for economic development, all of the salt costs are paid for out of TIF. That doesn't have the same town meeting responsibility as this budget does, because it's a warrant article.
You can also get payroll out of that too, off that 50,000, that 15% too also.
That's correct.
And I believe diesel fuel, which we're gonna be very close this winter.
So the state does allow for bad winters. At this point, if there's not any other questions, I'd like to just let Jeff talk a little bit about potential equipment as we're talking about capital improvements. Jeff has put together a road surface management project that would primarily work out in the Schuster Road area with paving done on the Schuster Road, the rest of Preble Avenue out to Schuster Road, Walker Road, and Colby Bryant Road. Yeah. So other than that, he's got some equipment concerns, you know, just like any other department head should. So.
Is there anything in the future for any attention at all on Naomi Avenue? I don't even know how you can plow down that road. I'm talking about drive down the road.
Nah, none in the foreseeable future. Our right-of-way width out there is only 20 feet.
Yep.
It's not very wide. No, the only thing you can really do out there is an overlay, smooth it up a little bit. So,
You'd be better off to take the tire up and leave the dirt and be smoother. It's easier on your equipment. Okay.
you know, the other projects are on the River Road, continue paving from where we left off last year up to the new part of the reconstruction part by the gravel pit. And then to finish from the gravel pit up to the Solon Town line, which is desperately needed also.
Are we gonna have that corner taken care of at the gravel pit this year?
I'm waiting on a price from a contractor to get that, and I haven't heard back from him yet. And those funds there will be also paid out of the TIF funds, they won't come out of general taxation. As far as the equipment goes, we're looking at possibly another update on our snow blower. The snow blower we have now is 18 years old, and a new sidewalk machine, a tractor, a new sidewalk machine. There will be some smaller purchases that we might be able to use our account that we got started, such as for a new plow and a dustpan for one of the trucks that is getting very worn out. That's well over 20, 25 years old. And possibly we need a new screen for our sand screen that was built 20 years ago and has fallen apart and been welded numerous times, but those are just some of the smaller items under $10,000. The new truck, I spoke to the salesman last week. The delivery date in Bangor is June 2nd. And I would think that we need to start thinking about putting money away, $55,000 like we have in the past for another truck and or possibly another loader, a bigger loader, because our big loader, our big 938 cat loader has over 12,000 hours on it, and nothing's been done to it as far as engine, motors, transmissions. So that's something that is going to be looked at also.
Where's the nearest place to have that refurbished?
They would have to put a Bangor or Caterpillar.
That's
That loader?
Yes.
Yes.
Caterpillar.
Yeah. The cab's rotting out on it. And we still use it every day. That's our primary machine because it's the biggest machine. Any other questions?
All right, if you want to move on to recreation, which is on page 6. No major changes in this. The way that this budget is split up is, you see one part that says Preble Avenue, the other part says recreation. The top part that says Preble Avenue, these are essentially the costs that we have in maintaining the fields and paying for some of the expenses over at the Preble Avenue ball fields. The rest of the budget is primarily our summer and other recreation programs. So this line here that has the personnel in it, again, 35,000 current year, 37,500 next year. All of our stipends primarily stay the same, but it's the high school students that work during the summer program and the winter programs that will be paid $11 an hour right now and will be paid $12 an hour in January of 2020. So that overall difference in recreation comes up to a 3.5% increase. I will attempt to answer any questions about recreation if there's any. All right, if there's no further questions, we will conclude our look at the budget by looking at the general government administration budget. This is here in the office. Includes our staff. Since 2014, we have operated with 4 full-time staff, including myself, and 1 part-time and then 2 part-time. So we've had 4 full-time and 2 part-time. Last year, this board approved making one of our part-time workers a full-time equivalent so that they could receive health insurance. And that put them at 32 hours per week. And so this budget here would propose moving that individual to 40 hours a week. And that administrative support provides support not only for some of the administrative work that I do, but also work that the finance director, Tammy, does, Susan with code enforcement, and Shirley with assessing, and Kathy with clerk and treasurer work. So that full-time position now is basically assigned to just about everybody in the office that needs admin work done. We don't have secretaries per se, but we have people that do a lot of the admin work, and this person has proven to be very good at administrative work. So that will account for the increase here, and also down here, down in our total employee costs. You see that goes from 85,000 to 99. That's reflective of an additional health insurance policy. Other than that, we'll have some software increases with our Trio software this year. We are going to continue to put money aside for interest on the line of credit, mainly because if we have to hold this current $400,000 until April, we'll probably end up having to pay back $5,000 in interest, or we can use $2,500 from this budget and $2,500 from the next budget. Now, looking to the worst case scenario, if we do get a unfavorable ruling from the state board, we would have to change this line and incorporate just interest, from just interest, into incorporate having to make a payment back if we did have to make a repayment on that line of credit. Any questions on the admin part?
Where this person going from 32 to full-time already has health insurance?
Right, because 32 hours was the federal government's.
So where's the new health insurance person?
We are now budgeting for it. When we moved that person, we did it in the midst of the current budget,
Oh,
and we did not have the amount budgeted for. Under the category of general government, you have the planning board, very little changes, if any, to that. Code enforcement. The bottom line of code enforcement doesn't change tremendously, it's still about 26,800 compared to 26,400 this year. But what we are going to pay our code enforcement is going to be a recommended change, primarily because Susan will be a certified code officer when you have the opportunity to appoint her this year. When she was appointed last year, she was appointed pending her certification. But she has taken most of the state requirements to do that. So there is a change in her rate of pay that goes along with that. Boards and committees is pretty much the same. Elections, there's an increase in what we spend in elections from 3,000 up to 4,200. A little bit of that is minimum wage, because all those election clerks are paid minimum wage. But some of it is a requirement from the state that we maintain these electronic voting count machines. So when you go to vote, you know, when you slide your thing in there and it counts it for you. Well, the state doesn't pay for the maintenance on it, the taxpayers in Madison pay for the maintenance. And they're only a few years old, so. Then the last part there, I believe, is assessing. One of the things that Tammy and I discussed is over the years, we used to budget for abatements and write-offs. We decided not to do that since that money is primarily taken from the overlay that the assessors put into the budget. So it's just confusing to put it in there. So primarily this $40,000 amount, 37,000 of that is the contract for our contracted assessor. So that brings you down to overall general government, a total 595, 215, an increase of just under 3.5%. And that is all I was prepared to discuss tonight. I'll try to take any other questions, or if there's any questions from members of the advisory board. Robin, Patrick, and Paul, thank you for coming tonight.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Elias?
So, the bottom line on our total budget is how much of an increase?
Right now it's about 4%.
So don't we have to get permission or something? Don't we have a law that says we can only go up to 2.5% or whatever it is? What is that law?
Probably what you're referring to is what's called LD1.
Yeah,
And every year you have to run a calculation, and it tells you how much of an increase you can pass on to the taxpayers.
right.
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but our increase is well within what we're allowed to go up for, as far as,
So you don't know what the percentages were allowed to go up?
they don't calculate a percentage, they calculate a dollar figure. So
You don't know that?
our dollar figure right now, again, we're talking about non-capital, so. Yeah, right now, our increase in budget would be $110,000 year over year. And our LD cap is well over 700,000. So we don't come close to running the risk of that. So this is based on a number, not a percentage.
Mr. Porter?
Why was it necessary to draw on the credit line?
The board thought it was necessary in case we lost the appeal of Madison Paper's tax abatement to the full amount.
The credit line ended December 31st.
There would be no opportunity to borrow on it in 2019.
Okay.
They had to borrow on it in
And
2018.
we originally thought that things were gonna come to a head in February.
Yeah.
In early March, but it appears that that's not gonna be the case.
Thank you.
I believe Bangor Savings wouldn't go any further than
Yes.
Bangor Savings
2018.
was not interested in extending it, correct.
All right, any other questions? All right, any advisory board members, any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Number 2, discuss tax acquired properties.
So in your packets, you received a spreadsheet that shows 9 properties that fell into tax acquired. And I wanted to just touch on a couple of them. Kathy has prepared 4 quitclaim deeds because the following accounts have been paid. That was 1762, which is 41 Hayden Street. 1896, which is 852 East Madison Road, that was paid. 1285, which is 43 Thomas Street, that's paid. And account number 537, 4 Ash Street, that's paid. So if the board were willing to make a motion on those, and you can do it however the board wishes, you can do it individually or you can do it as a group.
We're looking for a motion to award a quitclaim deed for accounts 1762, 1896, 1285, and 537.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to award quitclaim deed to the following accounts: 1762, 1896, 1285, and 537. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries.
Take a moment while they sign. I would like to have your full attention.
Good, David.
I'll list the numbers that are stamped.
So with those 4 accounted for now with quitclaim deeds, that leaves the town with 5 properties. All of these properties are occupied by the owner, or per se. I'll go from the top to the bottom. Account number 737, 15 Honeywell Road. That property owner came in and paid a few $100s. He promises to pay the remaining $200 by the end of this week. So if that's the case, there'll be another quitclaim deed to come before the board. Account number 1049, that's 19 Middle Street. This has been a struggle for several years. In fact, this homeowner just got out of foreclosure a few months ago. He has had some financial issues, he's had some health issues, been in and out of the hospital. That's one that I'll be watching very closely and working with on a regular basis. But his ability to pay is limited. That may be something the board may have to take action on in the distant future, I'd say maybe in the next year or so. Account number 261, 1676 Lakewood Road. They plan to pay off the remaining $818 by the middle of March. Account number 1162, 57 Maple Street. That was a situation where the 4 children are now on the property that was once owned by their mother. The one that lives there did not get the notice, since the notice was sent to his brother, who no longer lives in Anson. So I'll be working closely with this one. We hope to have this one paid off within the next 30 days or so. And then the last account is 2106, the property at 144 Whittier Farm Road. And as I mentioned prior to the meeting, that is owned by a nonprofit out of the Winslow area. But since it's not property that is used for their particular ministry, it is subject to tax. So Mary is here with Gertrude Ministries, and because it is on the lake, that property tax is fairly high.
I noticed.
It's about $3,300 is what's in the 2016, so it's about $3,000 a year for property taxes. Traditionally, you have been able to pay that, but this year you did not make the deadline. I think the board either may have some questions or would like to hear your thoughts or plans for redeeming it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to apologize to the board that the property taxes were not paid on time. That was not because we neglected it or didn't want to pay them. It's just that the funding that was allocated to us to pay the taxes did not come in on time, which put me, as the overseer of the ministry, into a real crunch, financial strait that I have yet to resolve other than to say I know that it will be paid. The funds that are due the ministry, I have been told that they could be here even this week, which certainly would be very good and help us all, because I really don't want to lose that property for the ministry. It's been set aside since the 1950s. I came to Maine in '84 to work with a woman by the name of Mrs. Keegan. Her parents built that cottage, and they willed it to the ministry when they passed on. So it has a bit of a family history, and it's used as a spiritual retreat. And so far, I haven't been able to put the funds together to pay the whole tax bill. But I would appreciate the board's consideration in that I'll at least start to pay something on it, hopefully all of it. I don't want to nickel and dime this. I do want to take care of it forthrightly, because that's Father's business, and he doesn't let things slide. So he's given me every assurance that he's going to take care of it, and I'm a woman who lives by faith, and I believe him, and I just ask for the board to help me over this bit of a road hurdle.
I'd like to table this until our next meeting next month, and see where it stands at that time.
All right.
And that should give the lady,
I would appreciate that.
you know, something to give us some feedback, if not, pay the taxes.
Right, and hopefully even before that time, I would be able to satisfy the outstanding debt. But I just want you to know, I've not been wanting to be negligent. I just appreciate your help.
Thank you. So basically what you're saying is table the whole,
That one,
just that one.
2106.
I think that's, again, we have a motion and a second to table 2106, account number 2106 until the next meeting.
Yes.
All those in favor? All in favor,
Whatever
motion
the
carries.
date is, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go home and keep praying.
All right, number 3, finalize warrant for special town meeting on March 11, 2019.
Okay, so the conversations back and forth by email with both sets of attorneys, the attorneys for Woodlands and the attorneys for the town, have gone well. We have the final draft of the TIF document. We have the information that should go in the warrant. I made a draft of that at our last meeting. We have the official one completed now. Since you already approved this town meeting with this warrant, I do need a renewed signature page, because the data is now up to date. Nothing in the articles changed, it's just the language regarding to the TIF had to be specific. So one of the things that the board will have to do is to authorize a public hearing prior to the special town meeting. And to make it convenient, it's probably good to do it on the same night. So what I have proposed is that we put an advertisement in the paper. It has to be 10 days ahead of time, so that'll be Friday the 1st, to advertise a public hearing at 6:30 on March 11th at the auditorium of the junior high. And then the town meeting will be scheduled for 7. Is there any objection to that from the board? So what,
We need a motion to
for
make that happen.
for a public hearing, yes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a public hearing on March 11th, 6:30 PM at the Thomas Elias Auditorium.
Yep.
You've already picked that, right?
I did, confirm that today.
All right, any questions on that? Mr.
I
Elias?
just want to make a comment. The only reason why I'm signing that is because you got a special town meeting up here. Otherwise than that, you're getting 5 signatures for nothing. You can staple it anything you want.
What makes you think I haven't already done it?
I'm worried about what the heck are we signing
You
here?
get the last one.
You just,
All right, all those in favor? All in favor?
you just bought Jeff a new truck.
Yeah, there we go. I'm wondering.
Thank you, George.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm gonna remind the town manager of is that we need to get people out to vote, so
Well, that-
we need to get
50.
the people involved here,
Yeah.
to get their people there.
There have to be 50 registered voters for the town of Madison to be in attendance. That's one of the reasons that a public hearing ahead of time is helpful, because if you get 20 minutes in the public hearing and you realize you only got 10 people there, then you've got to either panic or cancel it, so.
Woody?
Are we gonna put another, piece of the paper to stress this?
Yeah.
And also put it on Channel 11?
Yeah, that's the plans tomorrow. So
All right, fine.
I just wanted to make sure we had all of our ducks in a row for that public hearing, and it's already on the electronic sign. We'll be using Channel 11 and the newspaper to help promote. So I think that is it for that.
Mr. Hooty, any concerns?
None,
Mr.
sir.
Elias?
None for me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Savage? No? All right, any citizens' concerns? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to go into executive session to discuss economic development pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056C.
Second.
I have a motion to go, and a second to go into executive session to discuss economic development under 1 MRSA 4056C. All those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries with executive session at 7:21.